welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last several years, I have been teaching each fille du roi or king's daughter and getting to know their stories a little bit better. There are over 700 of them. Today, we're on episode 245. You do the math. Not too bad. But before we begin, let me show you ways you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. The next three are ways to help the channel grow. Coffee and Patreon are external platforms. You can see the links that I've provided in the notes. And on my website, How Roots Will Travel, we have a PayPal button that you can also contribute. To those of you who have done so thus far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate every single one of you for your support, your kind words. They mean the world to me. So thank you so much. So with that being said, let's get started and get to know episode number 245. Today's episode takes us to 245, Marguerite Roussel. And she is a viewer request, and she happens to also be the great-grandma of my best friend. So this one's for you as well. So let's have a look at Marguerite's life. She was born 1646 in Mesnien, France. Her parents were Jean Roussel and Louise Mény. There are less than 1,000 people who live in this small farming and forestry village today, which lies on the river Bethune. Now, the church that she would have been baptized in was the Church of St. Pierre and St. Paul, which dates from the 11th century. And on the bottom right, you have this beautiful, magnificent Château Louis de Boissy, which is from the 15th century and dates from that. It was apparently very damaged in 2004, but this is a picture that I had that I got from the research that I did. I'm fairly certain it's before the damage. So let's have a look at how Marguerite comes to New France. So Marguerite, upon her father's death, she would elect to become a fille du roi. She took with her a dowry worth about 200 pounds, and she got her ticket on l'Espérance, which means hope. On September 3rd, 1673, she arrived in New France. And what's really, really interesting about l'Espérance, it was the final ship that took les filles du roi. This was it. If she had not gotten on that boat, that ship, there would not be descendants today. So there you go. I mean, it's one of those flukes of history. She managed to get on that last ship. Let's have a look at the groom she selected. The groom that she would select and who would select her, his name, Martin Duchiron de Delaurier. He was born in 1633 in a place called Bourges, France. His parents were Michel Duchiron and Jeanne Briand. Now, let's talk a little bit about this particular, really kind of a historic place. It is found in the region of France known as Centre Val de Loire, which means the center of the Centre Val de Loire, so it's in the center. It is part of the Département of Chartres, and it happens to be the capital of that department. So it is a fairly large city, 63,000 people as of the last census. Bourges has existed since the time of Julius Caesar, that is to say, the 4th century BC. The name Bourges comes from the German word Burg, which means hill or village. Bourges has played an important part in French history and was at one time the capital of the Viscounty of Bourges until the 11th century, and then the capital of the Duchy of Berry in 1360. Various kings were born here, treaties were signed. So it is, if you come from this descendancy, it'll be very interesting for you to do the research as to where he comes from. Now, his church, Saint Etienne, probably didn't look like this when he was baptized there, but it dates from the 12th century. 30th, 1665, as so many did before him, as part of the Carignan regiment. He was with the company of La Duranté. So Martin obviously stayed in New France after his regiment would have disbanded. And he was around probably from 8 years. So 8 years to build up a life and wait for the potential of marriage. And he took it. They were married September 27, 1673. That means that Marguerite was married a little bit more than 3 weeks after she arrived. Now that is quick. I mean, you literally can think of them, her getting off that boat and him waiting there. I mean, it must have been that quick. So fabulous, fabulous story in terms of the, just getting together and making that happen. So Martin and Marguerite would move to Cap Saint-Ignace, which was a relatively new seigneurie at that time. Cap Saint-Ignace had been founded in 1672 and was born from multiple land grants from the intendant Jean Talon. 5 different seigneuries were created that eventually would form Cap Saint-Ignace. They each had their own name, so it's kind of Cap Saint-Ignace kind of encompasses all of it. So we have Vincelot, we have Lillette, La Fesnay, Saint-Joseph, and Saint-Clair. They would purchase a land concession at Cap Saint-Ignace. One of the most interesting things about the seigneury is that it is the first one owned by a woman, Geneviève de Chavigny, who happened to be a widow whose husband had done a great deal of good deeds in France, and Talon rewarded her with this. Where does the name Cap Saint-Ignace come from? A small cape forming a peninsula in the river is the origin of this name Cap. As for Saint Ignace, it seems that this name was given by the Jesuits in honor of their founder, Saint Ignatius. He would go on to have 4 children. Paul, we have no more information of. Jeanne married Pierre Tellier and had 2 children, both of whom produced descendants. Pierre, we have no information of. And Marie-Madeleine married twice, but did not produce any descendants. So if you are a descendant of this, you are absolutely coming from Jeanne, unless we have DNA to prove otherwise. And in the 1681 census, we see Martin and Marguerite. Their children, Paul, Jeanne, Pierre, and Madeleine. They have 2 guns. They have 7 bêtes à cornes, so that's about 7 goats, and 5 arpents, about 3 acres of land that they now have. So they would go on to go to an even more remote place called Île-aux-Grues and Île-aux-Oies, and it was also known as Île Sainte-Marie, La Bécare, Île-Hôpital, Île-des-Prairies, Île-des-Jaunes, and Île-des-Brousses. So you can imagine it's gone by lots and lots of names. This is an area of Quebec that I knew nothing of actually before I did my research. And we have Jeanne Savonnet, another very famous fille du roi, who was here at one time. So Île-aux-Grues is a place where people did come to. It was a particularly fertile place. And let's take a look at the very unusual islands. And at the start of the French colony, the 2 islands were actually drawn as one on the maps. It was only in 1633 that the Jesuit Paul Le Jeune, after an expedition, stated that the second island was filled with snow goose, and it was declared that they would be called that. That's what Île-aux-Oies means. By 1646, Charles de Montmagny became the seigneur of these islands as well. Throughout the next couple of 100 years, the ownership of these islands would pass through many hands, notably the Augustine nuns, which used these islands as a base to send products they made to Quebec. By 1964, Île-aux-Oies was purchased by a private hunting club, and now the island is completely privately owned. Île-aux-Grues is a very small municipality of about 146 people. The children are flown to school each day. Can you imagine? During the summer, there is a ferry that operates as well, but in the winter, the only way to reach the island is by plane. And what is really common in this place, because obviously tourism is very big, cheese making and dairy farming. Tourism obviously is a huge place because it's so beautiful, and it makes people very peaceful. It's one of those, I don't know if it has a vortex or what it is, but obviously from what I've read, people go there to kind of reclaim their sanity and just kind of, it's a very serene place. So I wonder what it was like when Marguerite and Marguerite were there. So sometime between the 1681 census and 1682, Martin would pass away. He was in his very late 40s at that time. Very shocking death. Obviously, she was left with 4 children to take care of. What would happen to Marguerite? The second groom that would appear in Marguerite's life, his name was Etienne Bruel, and he was born in 1656, making him 10 years younger than our fille du roi. He was born in Paris, France, and his parents were Pierre Bruel and Jeanne Vanier. Now, the church that he would have been baptized, you can see on the bottom right of your screen. It's called the Church of Saint-Séverin, and it was built at the beginning of the 13th century and then rebuilt again by 1448 and was expanded numerous times into, I think the latest that I've read is 1684. It is one of the oldest churches that remains standing on the left bank and continues to be a place of worship. Now, the area of Paris where Etienne was born was the 5th arrondissement, which is also known as Pantheon. And it is, each of those arrondissements is subdivided into 4 different sections, if you will. And the Quartier Latin, the Latin quarter, it's not a Spanish place. It really is a district dominated by universities and other educational institutions, as well as the very prestigious Sorbonne. It's actually the oldest arrondissement in Paris and was actually built by the Romans. And you can still see traces of it in such sites as the Arène de Lutèce, which is a Roman amphitheater, as well as the Therme de Cluny. Now remember that it is found on the rive gauche, the left bank of the River Seine. So this is where Etienne would have emerged from, the really essential part of Paris. I mean, you can't get more Parisian than this. So Etienne would come to New France with the profession of baker. So he was somebody who absolutely had a trade and could use it well. So they were married on November 10th, 1682. It's lovely when we can have a marriage record. So we don't know when Etienne would have come to New France, but obviously he was there. Probably if he was born in 56, then probably 76, we want to say. So he was there. He was around, and just waiting for his chance. And then don't forget, he took on a widow with 4 children. Amazing. Very good man. They would go on to have 5 children of their own. Jeanne, Geneviève, Marguerite, Louis, and Vital. Now, normally at this point, I tell you all kinds of things, but I'm going to wait because the story takes a twist, and I don't want to give it away before it's time. Okay? So just know that there are at least 5 children that they have together, and let's see what happens. By 1693, they had moved to Quebec, and by 1700, they sold their property on Ile des Oies and went to France. No sooner when they heard of a new opportunity in a faraway place called Louisiana, and the king had made some plans. So now the history of Mobile, Alabama becomes part of this story. The island's French history began on January 31st, 1699, when the explorer Pierre Lemoyne, Sieur d'Iberville, who's pictured here, one of the founders of French Louisiana, arrived at Mobile Bay and anchored near the island on his way to explore the mouth of the Mississippi River. D'Iberville mistakenly named it Ile du Massacre, Massacre Island, because of a large pile of human skeletons discovered there. In reality, the site was a Mississippi burial ground which had been broken open by a hurricane, not a massacre site. However, this dramatic name stuck for a while. And then you can see on the map here where exactly the island that he discovered was. So Etienne, Marguerite, and their family come aboard a ship called Le Peliquet, and they would arrive in Alabama in 1703. Now, I think that we're pretty certain that the 5th child they had, Vital, would have not made it So we're not exactly sure. I haven't seen any evidence to say that he came aboard with them, but at least we know that 3 of the daughters and his son were there. Her children from her first marriage were not present with them at this time. They had either died or had moved on. So the Pelican Girls, the Casket Girls, however they are called, was a group of ladies from Paris who were chosen to go and begin the population of Louisiana or Mobile. They were not the only, this was not the only settlement, but this is the first one in 1704. There were others that followed throughout the next 10 to 20 years. And you can see on this list that we have Geneviève Burel and Marguerite Burel. Notice that we do not have Jeanne listed here. I did some further work. It was just for whatever reason, she's not listed, but she was there. She did get married. I can assure you of that. Now, on the very bottom, you have Étienne, Marguerite, Roussel, and then Louis Burel. So obviously they were on that ship with their girls. So very different, but they're still considered Pelican Girls. So let's have a look at the family that they then created. We have Jeanne, who would marry François Jean Trudeau in Mobile, Alabama. They would eventually settle in New Orleans, and the Trudeau family and its descendants are among the oldest families in New Orleans. And yes, if you are a descendant of Jeanne and François, you are indeed related to Pierre Elliott Trudeau. François Jean was the son of Étienne Trudeau, who is the original Trudeau in Montreal and is the great-grandfather of the former Canadian and current Canadian Prime Minister. They would have 8 children, 7 of whom would make it to adulthood. 2 of their descendants, brothers, would be Surveyor General of New Orleans and the Governor General. So you could say that government is part of this DNA. Geneviève would marry Claude Trepanier and would also be one of the founding families of Louisiana. They would have 8 children, all of whom would make it. Marguerite would marry Pierre Dardin and would have 1 child. Pierre's mother was a fille du roi, Jeanne Barbery, who will be featuring very soon in this series. Then we have Louis, who did not leave any descendants, but was there present in Louisiana. And Vital, we believe, died before they, either in Paris or on, somehow on the transit, because he did not make it to the island. We do not know with any certainty where they passed away. We assume it is in Mobile, although I've seen reports that he died in France. But I like to think of them living out their years in Alabama and, kind of resting after the very adventurous life they led. He would go on to open a tavern, which was likely the very first tavern in that very small colony. He would actually be accused, and his tavern was shut down by Jean d'Iberville he was accused of stealing wine from a soldier and whatnot. Eventually, those charges were dropped. And in a surprising twist of fate, he would be one of the star witnesses for the trial, the very first trial in the colony that was accusing Jean d'Iberville of similar crimes. In 1708, he actually became a witness for the defense, and he claimed that d'Iberville was a good and sound administrator. So just interesting how that all worked out. So I like to think of Marguerite and Étienne being really, really soulmates, and were able to begin a brand new life. Started a life in Quebec, and then took their pioneering spirit to Louisiana or Mobile, and so I think that they're an amazing couple. So really, really enjoyed researching them. Here are the websites that I use most consistently. Now, because they go into Louisiana, a lot of these Quebec-based genealogical will not kind of elaborate. So try WikiTree and some of the connections there for the Louisiana research. And I also have a couple of other websites that I used just for this particular episode. It was absolutely fantastic. And I'm so glad for my viewer who alerted me and who said, you really need to to do this one. And I want to thank Dahlia for recommending this, because this was really an amazing ride. So, always think to yourself, hey, maybe there's 700 of them and I don't know the story. So if you've got a story that you think I need to tell, first and foremost, I'm going to tell them all eventually, but let me know which one you want. So I really do thank our viewer um, who recommended this one. Wasn't that a great story? I loved this story. It took me to places that I never would have imagined. I am so grateful to the viewer who wrote and said, you got to look at this. And I always love it when I can move out of my comfort zone. I explored Louisiana and Alabama, and that's kind of what we do as genealogists. We are constantly on the prowl. And really, that's kind of why travel, because we need to explore location. So this was a tremendous story, and I'm very, very grateful to have been able to tell it. So to all of you who are descendants of this remarkable woman, you truly are blessed. And we are blessed to have had this story. So thank you to Marguerite for her extraordinary life and her bravery and her courage and her unflinching loyalty to not only her family, but to her husband as well. So we thank you and we bless your memory. And I thank my patrons and supporters so much as well for their support and their constant, wind beneath my wings, I call them. So thank you so much to all of you. And until I see you on episode 246, I will tell you au revoir.